Now, the binary code that we use in programming today was actually inspired by a discovery made in prehistoric China. Check this out. Hello and welcome to the Chain Smoking Writers channel. And in case you didn't know, that's me, Apingo, the Chain Smoking Writer. And today we are going to talk about Fuxi, the son of thunder. So a long time after the catastrophe that almost wiped out humans from the face of this world, people actually prospered. And far to the northwest, thousands and maybe millions of leagues to the northwest of the central realm, there was this kingdom, this mythical kingdom called Huaxu. And in this kingdom, it was kind of like a paradise on earth, maybe. And the king of this kingdom had a daughter. And she was a lively and adorable little girl. But you know, like all little princesses in fairy tales and stories, she was mischievous and always, up to little shenanigans. So one day, the princess of Huaxi snuck out of the palace and went exploring around, and she ended up in this place called the Thunder Marshes, 雷泽, or the Thunder Lakes. And this was a beautiful place, with calm waters and beautiful scenery and stuff like that. And she was playing along, the lake, enjoying herself, when she saw this giant footprint on the banks. And being a curious little girl, she wanted to compare the size of this footprint to her dainty little feet. So what she did was that she jumped in and she put her foot on the footprint that she saw on the ground, on the bank. But the thing is, as soon as her feet landed in the footprint, a giant clap of thunder roared through the sky, and the face of a giant appeared from amongst the clouds and smiled at her. This vision appeared just for a flash, and it disappeared as soon as she saw it. And suddenly the princess of Huaxi had this sense of being constricted, being bound so tightly that she couldn't breathe. And in a fright, she just ran home to the palace. The thing is, the very next day, she found out that she was pregnant. Well, yeah, another immaculate conception story. Don't worry, there are more of these coming up in future stories. There are a lot of this, like really a lot. But back to the story. Now, this pregnancy carried on for 12 years. 12 long years, this little princess was pregnant. And at the end of these 12 long years, she gave birth to a boy who has an upper body and the face of a man and the lower half of a snake. Yes, there's another half man, half snake being in Chinese mythology. Well, stay to the end of the video where I share with you some of the findings, the trivia and bonus facts about this phenomenon. Yeah. This child obviously is the protagonist of our story today, Fuxi. He had strength that is beyond comprehension and an intellect that was without peer in his time. And since the princess of Huaxi was pregnant for 12 years before birthing Fuxi, the ancients used 12 years as a calculation of one celestial cycle. The ancients also believed that the footprint that the princess stepped into belonged to the god of thunder, and the vision, the face that appeared in the clouds, was the face of the god of thunder himself. And therefore, they also believed that Fuxi was a son of thunder. Fuxi grew up very quickly to be a very capable man, and the people naturally chose him as their leader. He implemented many changes and improved many of the living habits of the people, and he was always trying to find new ways to improve society at large and to improve the standard of living for the people around him. As it was still a hunter-gatherer society at this time, dying of starvation was still very common. I mean, you have to understand that their source of food and sustenance depends very much on the environment they are in, and it was not really within their control of whether they get to find prey or they get to find fruits or berries together. So starvation was a very real problem. And Fuxi was, of course, naturally very disturbed by this, and he was always racking his brains to figure out how can he help his people find a more sustainable way of finding food. So one day, as Fuxi was pondering this question as he was sitting by a stream, he saw there were a multitude of fishes and shrimps that was, just frolicking in the waters. And he thought to himself, now wouldn't it be great if we had an easy way to just harvest this river produce from the waters? And the very next day, while he was sitting at the same spot, he saw a spider nearby weaving his little web on a branch of a tree. So Fuxi sat there and observed the spider diligently weaving his web. And before long, a bug flew past and flew into the web and got caught. I mean, the spider made quick work of the bug and went back to waiting for its next meal. And this gave Fuxi an idea. Fuxi quickly went to gather up all the vines he could find around him, and he sat there weaving a net out of these fibers. And when he was done, he threw the net into the river, and lo and behold, when he pulled up the net out of the water, he caught the fishes and the shrimps. Fuxi, of course, was ecstatic that he made this new discovery and he could solve a very big problem for his people. So he immediately went back to his people and he taught them how to weave a net and how to use it and how to catch fish and shrimps and produce food for themselves. And the people, of course, they learned the method and they later improvised upon it to use it for catching birds as well. And over time, apart from making this net and teaching people how to fish, Fuxi also discovered how to tame animals and taught the people how to domesticate animals. And basically, he introduced the first very basic, very fundamental system of animal husbandry. And this greatly improved the stability of food sources for the people, and it helped society prosper and grow as a result. This was a time when people still did not have a lot of understanding about nature and their surroundings. And so naturally they would be, afraid and in awe of a lot of natural phenomena. They would cower in fear when there were thunderstorms, and they would escape and try to find shelter when there was fires breaking out in the woods and stuff like that. And Fuxi was slightly different, or rather I could say he was quite different in one major aspect. As in, he was an extremely curious person. So whenever a natural, I won't call it a catastrophe, but a natural phenomenon happened, such as a thunderstorm or forest fire or floods, Fuxi would actually climb to the top of a nearby mountain and observe what nature was doing. He would observe and he would try to figure out what was happening, try to find an explanation for all these phenomena that was going on around him. And in one of these outings, when he was climbing up the mountain, a beast startled him when it jumped out, across his path when he was walking up the mountain. This beast just jumped out across his path and it startled Fuxi. And this was a strange beast with the head of a dragon and the body of a horse. So I think we'll call it a dragon horse from here on out. And Fuxi was like startled when he saw this beast, and he decided to follow it and see where it was going. And he followed it to this place called Wei Shui, or the Wei River. And this dragon horse jumped onto a rock that was in the middle of the river. And this was a flat, disc-like piece of rock that was in the middle of the river. And on this rock, there was a kind of pattern. And this pattern is what we would recognize today as the symbol of Taiji, or the symbol of yin yang, the two interconnected shades, black and white, in a circle, in a circular form. Yeah, and this was the symbol or a pattern that was on the rock. And somehow this pattern matched up with the markings on the dragon horse's body, which was made up of a series of straight lines and broken lines. And this kind of gave Fuxi an epiphany. Using what he saw, using these patterns on the rock and on the body of the dragon horse, Fuxi drew what is believed to be the first bagua, or the 8 trigrams, with the Taiji sign in the middle and a series of the straight and broken lines around it, a series of 8 of them, therefore 8 trigrams. He used a different variation and combination of straight and broken lines to represent 8 different phenomenal and observations in nature. The Qian symbol was used to represent the sky, Kun was used to represent earth, Kan was used to represent water, Li was used to represent fire, Geng was used to represent the mountains, and Zhen was used to represent thunder. Xun was used to represent the winds, and Dui was used to represent lakes and marshes. And if you notice, all these symbols that Fuxi used to represent nature and its phenomenal were a combination and variations of straight continuous lines and broken lines. So what does that remind you of? Ones and zeros. A very basic idea of binary code. We'll get back to that in the bonus facts and trivial section, so stay on for that. And apart from his invention of the net and new ways of producing food, and his idea of recording and divining the future with symbols, Fuxi also made some societal changes. Fuxi basically divided people into families and clans, and this was a better and more efficient way of governing regions and groups of people. And future leaders were built upon this groundwork to develop governments and governing systems. Now, Fuxi was also credited with the discovery of acupuncture and was recognized in some quarters as the father of traditional Chinese medicine. Now, that is a point that I don't really agree with, but we'll get to that in a future episode. So, as the mythological first leader of the Chinese people, Fuxi basically laid the groundwork and opened the doors to the future development and flourishing of Chinese civilization and culture. And it was said that in his later life, Fuxi actively abdicated his position. He gave up his leadership role to younger and more capable people to better lead the population into the future. And at the end of his mortal life, of course he will be deified. So he ascended to the heavens and he was made the heavenly king of the east and was named the god of spring, and was sovereign over 12,000 square li of domain in the eastern heavens. Now, there are a few interesting points in this story that I would like to touch on. First of which is, you will have noticed that there are quite a few depictions of half man, half serpentine, or half man, half snake people in Chinese mythology. Now, that is not exclusive to the ancient Chinese. In fact, the snakes were pretty common across cultures in the ancient world. I'm sure some of you out there still have an unexplainable fear of snakes. Well, that is not something new. That is basically something that's hardwired into our DNA and our psyches. from the very early days. Snakes, especially venomous snakes, were held in awe by ancient peoples because they were stealthy and they can easily kill dozens of people with a single drop of their venom. And it is basically among one of the most dangerous things you can encounter in the wild, and not just in the wild, they would go into your settlements and, you know, kill you if you're not careful. Yeah, so the ancient people held snakes in awe, and a lot of them actually worship snakes as totems, or use snakes as a symbol of their tribe or their clans. And this is not exclusive to the Chinese. In fact, out of the many tribal people of the North Americas, I think, if I'm not wrong, if I remember correctly, there were at least 9 tribes of the North American Indians that use a snake as a totem or a symbol of their identity. This, you can say, was our ancient ancestors' way of seeking protection from these dangerous creatures. In a way, they are trying to tell the snakes that, hey, we are, you know, similar. We come from the same ancestor. You see, we have our common ancestor who is a half man and half snake. So please don't harm us. We are family. You know, that is kind of the message that the ancestors are trying to send to this, to nature and to these creatures. Now, the second point, as I've mentioned earlier in the story, was the idea of binary code, the ones and the zeros, the straight continuous lines and the broken lines that made up these symbols to represent the natural phenomenon. Now, it's totally not a clickbait when I said that, you know, modern computer binary code is inspired by this Pakwa, the 8 trigrams, because it is believed that the Pakwa and its symbols was a great influence and inspiration to German polymath Gottfried Leibniz, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, to invent the modern binary number systems. So the ones and zeros and later on the A to the F, that was inspired by the symbols used in the Pakwa, the 8 trigram. And that is really mind-blowing stuff, because imagine the most modern invention in our world is inspired, at least in part, by one of the most ancient discoveries of our early prehistoric ancestors. Now that is something to chew on. What else can we learn from the ancients? What else can we take from our early ancestors to better our lives in the modern world? That is something I believe we can look into. I mean, not me personally, but you know, the brilliant scientists and the many brilliant people in the world, they could look into this. We'll never know. So do you have any stories from your culture that, you know, kind of inspired some modern technology or some modern discoveries? You know, let me know. Leave it down in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you. Alright, so that's it for today. And if you feel that I've earned the privilege of your time and you like the story, please leave a like for this video below. And if you'd like to see more content like this, remember to subscribe. There's a box here or below there, and remember to click the bell icon so you would know when new videos drop every time it comes out. So I guess that's it, and I'll see you soon.